Hello. We just heads up, we are going live right now.
Yeah, perfect timing.
Great. Thanks, Quinn.
No problem.
So it looks like we may just have, oh, there's Jim. Hey, Jim, it's Molly Davis. How are you? Jim and I have emailed, but never laid eyes on each other, I don't think.
Molly, can you see Jim? I don't believe I can.
No, it looks like he's gone away. I see 9 people on the screen.
Yeah, I don't have him either.
Wait, there comes Jim back.
He's back.
You wait till it says he's done. Hey, Jim, how are you? Can you hear us okay?
Looks like his audio is giving him trouble.
Yeah. So Quinn or Craig, is there anybody else? Oh, Rosa. Is she going to be able to?
Rosa was hoping to be with us for the first part, I believe.
Right. I saw the email that she can't be here because she has another meeting at 4, but hopefully we might be done by 4.
Yeah, some of our other calls have definitely been shorter than the first call, so we'll see how it goes.
Yep.
Okay. So let's see. We have Quinn Welch, we have Craig Benz, we have Kimberly Baird, Jennifer Reynolds, Andy Shea. Is it Shea? Is that the right way to say it, Andy?
Yep, you got it.
Okay, great. Ricky Maher, Mary Quinn Raymer, Aaron Arnold Davis, Councilmember Jennifer Reynolds, and maybe Rosa will come later. And Jim, looks like Jim has gone away again. So sorry he's having trouble. All right, well, thanks everybody for being able to join today. It seems incredible that this is moving so swiftly, but that's just kind of where we are, what we need to do. So I think, Craig, you shared the agenda for today, which is a call to order. Does anything official need to be done about that, Quinn or Craig?
Yeah, I've just got to read this statement really quick.
Right.
Due to the COVID-19 pandemic state of emergency and Governor Beshear's executive orders regarding social distancing, this meeting is being held via teleconference pursuant to Senate Bill 150 as signed by the governor on March 30th, 2020, and Attorney General Opinion 20-05, and in accordance with KRS 61.826, because it is not feasible to offer a primary physical location for the meeting. So there you go.
Thank you for reading that so effectively.
Happy to do so. Happy to do it.
Okay. And do we have to identify who's on the call for the good of the record?
Craig, I think you can see everybody, can't you?
I can. I've already recorded everybody that's here. We're still waiting to see if Jim's able to get back in the room, but other than that, we're all set.
Okay, great. All right. Well, I have been reading through many of the documents that got sent both by Mary Quinn and then Craig's great kind of summary of information. And then Craig's also resending some of the salient pages of the Knoxville plan. And I've made a few notes about things that I think we might be able to use as a reopening benchmark, as well as just some things I thought were interesting. So if it's okay with you all, I'll just read you the one thing that I read in the document Mary Quinn sent called the Event Safety Alliance Reopening Guide. Everybody have a chance to kind of see that that was one of the attachments Mary Quinn sent. And I just found that this was, I'm not sure if this is a benchmark or hi, Rosa, or if this is how we should proceed, but it says, the life cycle of any event begins with the decision to do business in the first place. This guide is based on 2 core ideas. We all want to reopen as soon as possible. And in this context, as soon as possible means as fully and quickly as reopening can be done without unreasonably risking the health or safety of any people who create or attend live events. So I don't know, is that a benchmark or is that just guiding document? Is that guidance?
So Molly, thank you so much for reading that and kind of kicking us off in this to this very important topic of festivals and events and the sort of overarching question that is looming large and in our minds as to what to do. So I think what you just read is definitely a very solid guiding light. And I was curious if the committee would feel comfortable as our benchmark to suggest that we, as a city, follow suit with both state and national recommendations related to events, specifically as it pertains to social distancing measures. So I have had some conversations over the last few days with folks who are in the event business and also people who are working on events for later this summer, early fall. And I think the bottom line is it is really impossible to predict at this moment what that is going to look like. I don't think there is a scenario or a protocol out there that has it perfectly figured out about how we do socially distanced events. And I think that we are very much waiting to see how the governor's recommendations evolve over the next several weeks. We know late last week, he obviously put July as a benchmark for gatherings of 50 or more. So it's hard for those of us who are looking at large scale events in late August and September and October to imagine what those events would look like, considering that we're only at 50 in July. So I think as far as the benchmark for this particular plan and this particular committee, we simply say that we want to follow the recommendations of both the CDC and the governor's office pursuant to large scale gatherings, mass events. And Quinn, if you want to add anything to that, I know you and I have been wanting to talk at length with Monica Conrad in Parks and Rec. Obviously, she does a lot with events. So just trying to get into her queue. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, thanks, Mary Quinn. I think Mary Quinn really hits everything on the head there. I've talked with Monica just briefly about some of this, and they're still, they're still working through a lot of this stuff, just like everybody, in the world really is right now. So I think that given the timeline that this subcommittee has for Friday, I think really that's the best we can do, and I think it's the responsible thing to do as well. So I think Mary Quinn hits it on the head.
Sorry, go ahead, Councilmember Reynolds.
Oh, no, I don't want to interrupt you if you were going to say something.
I was just going to say I would be in favor of endorsing or embracing that, but I would certainly like to hear from others.
I guess where I'm a little bit confused, maybe Quinn, you could help clarify this. So what we say here in this group, how does that directly affect what happens? For instance, in terms of the festivals, wouldn't that decision ultimately be made by the city and Parks and Rec as to if we were able to have them or not? And then if they say, yes, you can have them, is this committee kind of saying this is how you would have one under social distancing guidelines? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And let me just clear this up. This document that we're talking about using and putting together for this final report we keep talking about, this document will be used as recommendations to the governor in his office, because ultimately anything we do as a city falls under his purview. So what we're doing and what he's asked cities all over the state to do is come up with, okay, what are your recommendations for reopening certain sectors? And so this committee's really job is to try and put together those recommendations the best we can. For some subcommittees, it's a little easier than others. I mean, in terms of, to be quite frank with you, I think the festivals piece of this, I think, is the most difficult of any of the 16 subcommittees that we have. So I think I think Mary Quinn's proposal, given those circumstances, really is probably the best course of action at this point, given this subcommittee's goals and directives by the governor or by the mayor. Does that answer your question?
I think so, yeah. So, but I mean, really, the city would act based on, like it has been, based on the governor's recommendations, and we're kind of just making some recommendations.
That's correct, yes.
Mary Quinn, I've got a question I think you might be able to answer. So just for clarification, when it's a group of 50, are those 50 people still 6 feet apart, or are those 50 people allowed to be regular apart?
I think so, as best I can tell with the governor, he has been good about giving us advanced deadlines so that we can work toward those dates. But as each industry sector has gotten close to that point, he has provided additional guidance and guidelines. So for example, manufacturing reopened on Monday, and over the weekend, there was additional guidance and clarification as to how manufacturing would open come Monday morning. So I think that while I don't have that level of detail or delineation yet, I think we will get that from the governor as we get closer to that period of time. I know, for example, with restaurants, there's definitely some questions, related to their capacities. We're expecting further clarification and guidance from the governor specific to restaurants any day now. And so I think that as we get closer to that July 1st, groups of 50, I think we'll get better information from him on exactly what that means. Do those people have to be socially distanced, or could you have a family reunion in a room and people not be spread apart? I don't know the answer to that at this time. Do you, Quinn?
I do not know, but actually, I think this raises another point that maybe we should address as well. I think I sit in on all of these subcommittee meetings, and one thing that a lot of the subcommittees are doing, like I'm putting together the distilleries and craft breweries subcommittee's report right now. They just concluded their work yesterday. They are actually requesting clarification from the governor on certain things as well. So if it's the desire of the subcommittee, we could also compile a list of requests for clarification, and I think get direct answers that way to specific questions that members of the subcommittee might have, if that's of interest.
Yeah, because then like kind of part two of my question was for festivals for sure, but I guess specifically what I know with the ballpark space that's 200,000 square feet, is that still like one group of 50, or would you be able to have, again, theoretically, several groups of 50 that again are a long ways away from each other, but it's still the same event? Because that's what, so it's been so like whether with a handful of other baseball stadiums, they've started circulating, and like whether it was Georgia was one, but Georgia just started seeing what they're doing and what the plan is for the Kansas City ballpark. So, I mean, they've been starting to, kind of circulate whether it's guidelines, hopes, exactly what they're going to do, whatever, it's a combination of all of them with the different teams and stadiums and events. But, a lot of it is being able to utilize the vast space that we have so that it would be a mere fraction of the capacity, but still safe and distanced and very clean and all of that stuff.
So Craig, I think we can just simply ask for clarification within this section on some of those detail, ask for further detail.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense.
So one question I was going to ask too, is this after these recommendations are put in, is this sort of the end of this, or as the governor does come out with more specific, because I don't even know whether he's got recommendations put together as far as how a festival is going to go together. Do we now at that point in time come back together to fine tune things or add to it, or Yeah, does anybody have an idea how that's going to work?
Ricky, I think that's a great question. That's a question we've gotten from some of the other subcommittees as well. I think that the idea of this initial report to the governor is to get some of these recommendations or requests for clarification just on paper. But I think what might happen later is, yeah, we might reconvene in some capacity. We haven't discussed that up to this point, but that's something that's being talked about in some of the other subcommittees. And it's certainly, you know, if you all are interested in continuing to meet, you know, after the conclusion of this work, I think it's a great idea and something that I think could help everybody to a great capacity.
I wonder if we could also, so I think Jim and I are in rather a similar situation in that we aren't so much a festival as we are a venue. And right now we are being, well, at least the Arboretum is kind of an unusual beast in that it's a partnership between UK and the city, but the UK Emergency Operations Center is made the call to close us. And I have been asked by my higher ups to work with Lexington Parks and Recreation to find out what their plans are. And I was in contact with Monica and Penny yesterday, and they have reopened Raven Run and McConnell Springs for visits of 1.5 to 2 hours. They have limited the number of cars, and they have an online reservation system so that when that slot gets filled, you have to kind of choose another time. And I think if we were in the fortunate position to be like that, it would be very helpful in terms of being able to kind of manage the crowds. Because my concern is that once we do, if we were to open simply to everyone, we would again be in the situation we were before, which is lack of social distancing, people congregating, and that's just my concern, I guess. I mean, parks are open, but none of the high touch surfaces or high congregating areas, and restrooms are cleaned, I gather, every hour by staff, and we simply don't have the staff or the resources to manage cleaning every hour or managing parking. So it seems like having some clarification from the governor and what he expects in terms of these large areas would be really helpful for those of us who are managing those kinds of sites. And that would be, I expect, Jim and me, probably to a less extent, the ballpark.
Well, in one sense, it actually does cross over when I think about it, because now that you see some of these things on television, what happens to, let's say, a festival or whatever that goes on that people don't adhere to the social distancing, and how do you handle some of the less compliant people that seem to show up at these things now? So, sort of in a way, I think that's something we're all going to be facing.
Well, I think and I apologize, my dog is growling in the background. I think that the document that Mary Quinn sent, the Event Safety Alliance, has some really good measures in terms of like designating a safety officer. What do you do with not just the people who attend the event if they can't kind of pass the first screening, but your workers? I mean, I think adopting industry guidance is a great idea, because then we don't have to reinvent it. We have to just, and I gather to Councilmember Reynolds' question is that I don't, at least in my mind, the various festivals simply aren't going to say to Mayor Gorton or the city, we want to have this. They're going to want to know how you plan to have it with these social distancing and other kinds of cleaning guidelines in place. I think they will ask for I would guess they would ask for a plan, not just a blanket, yes, we're going to do it, or no, you can't do it. So I think having guidance that's already kind of established nationwide would be very helpful to have, to say, this is how we're going to do it.
So perhaps, Molly, one of the things that we could do is use the core recommendations as a part of the Events Alliance as our recommended guidelines.
Yeah. And in the other document that you sent, the other document that you said, the reopening guidance, kind of has a basic question that people who have festivals and events need to first consider is, are the costs of reducing potential attendance to be safe worth having the event? And I think that's something that each event coordinator or each event coordinating committee will have to decide. Because I just simply don't think we can go back to having things the way that we've had them in previous years. There are going to be changes made to how each event would occur, I guess.
And actually, I didn't receive that Events Alliance recommendations. Was that distributed?
Craig sent that out maybe, gosh, after our last call. It would have been last week, I believe.
I'll
I
check.
think it was on Friday afternoon. Jim, we can definitely make sure that you get a copy of that.
Okay.
Right,
I thought it was super
I'll-
helpful.
Okay.
I'll find that email and re-forward that to you now, Jim.
Thank you. And then, and I know I missed the last meeting because I was working on a National Endowment Humanities grant. But are we forming particular recommendations that go beyond what's being issued by Frankfurt or CDC?
I think the easiest way to answer that question is we are using what the governor has issued as
Oh.
healthy at work and guidelines for reopening, and simply putting that into context for Lexington for several different industries.
Okay.
So there's a universal healthy at work that Governor Beshear has provided, and we're simply just adding Lexington layer to it.
Okay. And like for us, and I agree with Molly that we're sort of in a similar boat, although being private and having a small staff, yet the public perceives us to be public. We were having this discussion today about, I mean, I don't have staff to clean bathrooms every hour. And we can't afford to hire Cintas to do that for us. Although we're checking into all the things that Cintas is going to be offering for PPE and things like that. But my concern is that there's this big expectation that Ashland will act like a public space and have the resources to accommodate that, which we don't. And I can't afford a private police force to monitor I get text messages daily on nice days from neighbors telling me that there's too many people on the property.
We're in the same boat,
And
Jim.
it's really a challenge. And, and also we don't want to turn the place into, we know that most people are behaving appropriately and do appreciate that it is open. And in fact, that's what the largest amount of our charitable giving. I mean, I've already reached 50% of our annual budget through individual gifts of people being grateful for us being open. But then a lot of people just behave like it's their private backyard and host picnics and events without us being there. So it's hard to monitor. But there's another question I have in terms of reopening. On June 20, we have Diamond Tours booked a tour for 42 people. And they don't care what it is. It can be entirely outdoors. It doesn't have to be in the mansion. But it's a group coming from Florida. And 42 people on a bus coming from Florida via Georgia is going to land at Ashland, but we're sort of hoping they're going to cancel because I don't think we're going to be equipped by June 20 to accommodate that, let alone to have enough docents available to split them up into groups of 10. But is there any guidance on, groups coming in from out of state for an event?
I'll share one thing with you. We had our third annual 5K run scheduled for June 20th. John's Run Walk Shop has been doing this. This would have been the third year, and the recommendations from UK or that if we couldn't maintain social distancing of 6 feet between each person, we should not have the event. And we simply can't do that, given how a 5K operates. So we're not doing that. And I don't see how until more testing is in place so that you could be assured that your staff wouldn't be exposed to people with
Yes.
that. I don't know if there's guidance, but it seems like there's common sense, which is very much appreciate them making the reservation, but you don't want to risk your staff, and you probably don't want to have them brought in from other states.
Right. Well, that's, at this point, we were just using our own, as you said, common sense of how we would treat anybody that would want to come as a group. But I did think it was unusual that these other states that have more relaxed guidelines are now coming to us. So,
Jim, is that something that you would like clarification from the governor that we could include in the report?
yes,
Okay.
yes.
That's a great idea, Quinn. So I guess it seems kind of like a, what do you call that, endless loop thing? If the governor is looking to us for recommendations and we're saying we're going to follow CDC and the governor's recommendations, like how specific do we have to be in these recommendations and guidelines before someone says, this is the recommendation, this is what you have to do?
Right.
Is it following the
and
national guidance?
Right. And I think, Molly, I think that's a good point. I think, obviously, in an ideal world, I think we would all love to just, have the idea and run with it, right? And say, okay, here, Governor Beshear, here's exactly what Lexington needs to do, and here's what we can do statewide. But the reality is, and I see a group full of, brilliant people, brilliant leaders here in this community. We don't know the answers to a lot of this stuff right now. But I think, just going back to what Jim just posed, I think putting those ideas and questions right in front of the governor and his administration, I think will hopefully yield some of the guidance that we're looking for.
I do know, I was just going to say that one of the festivals I've been working with is part of a much larger national company. And even at that level, they're still really grappling with how they handle, frankly, the rest of their events for calendar year 2020, because no one has landed on a protocol that provides all the right assurances. And so it's like, as unpleasant as it is to think about not having these events, no one wants to be the event organizer that puts on an event and then has a rash of, a big outbreak with thousands of people getting sick. And I think, really, truly across this country, we are looking for how the live event business continues in the wake of this, public health crisis. And as I was saying to Quinn 2 days ago, I said, we've made a lot of progress, but the festivals is just, I'm just scratching my head because there's no easy solution for the types of questions we're trying to answer right now. Now, hopefully, with a little bit more time and, advancements in testing and further insights on the virus, maybe some of that stuff will come to light in the next several weeks. But these questions will very much help us frame what kind of guidance we need from the governor to make the decisions at the local level about what to do.
Mary Quinn, I had a neighbor who told me that there was a dog show at the horse park that had canceled. It was scheduled for September, I think. Is that accurate? Do you know anything about it? People are looking that far out, I guess.
So I can tell you we've had things cancel as far as October. And I know we've had some cancellations at the Kentucky Horse Park. I can't remember off the top of my head if it was the dog show or not, but I do know we have had several cancellations into the fall for groups and conventions both. I think that, there's a lot of unknowns and also people are worried about going to the expense of putting on a festival, not knowing if people will show up because of being scared about what they're going to be exposed to. And so it's not only a matter of reopening, but also consumer confidence and getting back out there. And so I think everybody's kind of looking for what that right balance is.
We've actually been starting to grapple with coming up with Plan B with virtual festivals. I don't want to say this too far out loud, but we're probably within 90% of we're not going to be able to even handle ours in October. We just can't. The more we talked about it, as far as how could we do things with, social distancing, then hand sanitizing, cleaning everything every hour. The more questions the more things that we answered, more questions came up, and we're starting to look at virtual already for October ourselves.
Yeah,
And
I
that
think
seems to be
there's a whole lot of people in that same boat. Sorry, Jim, what were you gonna say?
well, that I would say up until a week ago, I was hearing about a lot of other nonprofits postponing their events to September, October, and then I was thinking, well, then we're going to have this huge rash of events taking place that or so they were anticipating. But I think people are beginning to realize that that probably isn't going to pan out. That, people will make a decision about, like I have board members who want the Ashland Lawn Party moved from, June, the end of June into the end of September. Well, I'm not sure 425 people want to sit under a tent together at that point. So, there's going to be a lot of, my concern is you put in a lot of time to plan for these events, like Ricky was saying, and then what if you only get 25% response, or less than what would be productive? So, but at this point, I think I'm also concerned that if a lot of events do happen in October, then we could have that second spike that brings everything to a screeching halt. Because we will, at this point, if there is a second spike, we will shut down Ashland and say that it is off limits to everybody. So.
Jim, you like the Arboretum don't have a fence around it, do you?
Right. No.
Right. So I guess that would be sort of a interesting scenario to figure out how do you close something that doesn't have a gate or a fence.
Correct. And I don't think I really want to fundraise for the $1 million to build a wall around Ashland.
Right. Right. Exactly.
Molly, if I may, I believe Monica Conrad is actually watching our meeting right now. And she has just emailed me some guidelines for festivals. And I'll forward this to Craig and he can forward it to the rest of you. But there's bold text that says, based on challenges with maintaining physical distancing and limiting person-to-person contact, the National Recreation and Parks Association believes that large community events and large gatherings should not occur until there is no widespread community transmission, and ideally until there is a widely available vaccine.
Yep.
So that puts it after December at the soonest then.
That basically answers our question about festivals, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is it the opinion of the subcommittee to follow that recommendation?
Should we take a vote?
I think that would be appropriate. Sure.
Do we have to make a motion to take a vote?
From one of, why doesn't one of the members of the committee make the motion if that's desired?
Sure. I'll be happy to make the motion that we take a vote to follow the guidelines that Quinn just read from National Parks and Recreation about festivals.
I'll second that.
And now I say all in favor or discussion.
Raise your hand.
Aye.
I agree.
Aye.
I agree. Rosa says yes. Jim and Andy?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Looks like we're all in favor of accepting that. Motion carries.
Quinn, be sure and tell Monica, thank you for sending that along. I appreciate
Absolutely. Will do.
Yeah, thanks, Quinn.
I had-
Thanks, Monica.
Looked on the CDC site specifically about festivals and events and hadn't found anything, but I figured Monica would have the answer dialed in at the National Association level. So
If by chance, if we can get that emailed out, I would love to be able to see that just for the rest of the center so I can show them.
I will forward it to Craig now.
Okay.
Great.
I'll send that along while we're talking here, so you should all receive it in a few minutes.
Okay. So
shifting, just one other thing that I wanted to mention that's come up in quite a bit of conversation over the last few days, as you're thinking about, for those of you who have an actual establishment, your visitor center, the home, the ballpark, one of the things that has come up repeatedly, which I think is good advice, good counsel, is to make sure that through your website, your social media channels, and certainly in signage throughout your facility, that you are both articulating what you're doing from a safety and health perspective, but also the personal responsibility that comes with every person coming to your facility. So it's a two-way street. And as a matter of fact, the United States Travel Association has included that in their guidelines as well, that we all have robust communication, but that we also make sure that that personal responsibility is included in our communication strategies.
Can I ask then a clarification about, I guess, what Quinn had read and what the vote is? Is that saying that at this point, go ahead and call off what we're doing, or we're still kind of in a waiting and see until these two things happen, the safe distancing and the vaccine?
Kimberly, I think for the purposes of that vote, that was to vote to recommend to the governor in this subcommittee's report that we not have now that this is the recommendation. I'll read it again just so we're clear. This was the National Recreation and Parks Association who put this out. They said, based on challenges with maintaining physical distancing and limiting person-to-person contact, NRPA believes that large community events and large gatherings should not occur until there is no widespread community transmission, and ideally until there is a widely available vaccine.
Right. And I had that in my mind. I've sort of resigned myself to the fact that we were not doing this festival in September a couple months ago. I just hadn't said that. I just hadn't communicated that and been kind of working on my plan B also. So this is just to go into the recommendations, but doesn't necessarily mean we need to say that now.
That's correct.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. Mary,
Yeah.
do you have anything to add to that?
No, again, I think that I think certainly during June, as the governor opens up more of the state, we get closer to July and we get to expand the number of people in our group gatherings. I do think we'll get further clarification and guidance. And certainly after we submit this report next week, I hope we'll get some feedback from the governor specific to our questions here at the local level. So I think at this point, you don't necessarily have to make that, that call today, but I don't also, I certainly think it's a good idea to think about what Plan B looks like, realizing that we're up against some pretty big hurdles for the remaining the remaining calendar 2020 year.
Yeah,
Which
I
is-
don't see us. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, which is hard. I mean, it's hard. It's sad. There's a lot of, grief in it for me personally, because these events are so much about what makes our community special, but we just need those assurances in place before we can move forward safely, for everybody's well.
Another clarification on the vote that we had, because anyways, Quinn, how was it defined again? A community event? I mean, is there a definition as to what that means?
And Craig just sent this out to everybody. I think I just saw it come through, but I believe, and again, I haven't had the opportunity to read through all of this stuff, so I don't want to speak out of turn. I would go ahead and check out the email that Craig sent. It includes a few links as well that define. I think maybe there's a definition for community events on there as well. So I would reference that. I don't want to speak out of turn.
Okay, because the reason why I ask is, I mean, of course, again, I know I've mentioned a handful of times, but with a space as big as ours, I mean, we, with the June 15th youth sports and everything, I mean, and we've worked with KHSAA and the schools and everything. I mean, it was in the newspaper and so forth and so on for some of the seniors in high school. So, I just want to make sure that, in terms of the vote and everything like that, what we're talking about in sense of community event, because I think I can have 10 million different, different definitions.
Oh, I totally agree. And also I should mention specifically for you, Andy, we do have an athletics subcommittee as well that I think you might fall under as well. So I would pay attention to what comes out of those recommendations. But yeah, I think in terms of the vote just now, I think we're speaking in terms, Mary Quinn, hop in here if you need to, but I envision this more on the festival side than maybe the athletic side, just because we're addressing the athletic stuff from a different angle.
I definitely think there's a delineation, and Andy, I don't think that your vote is binding in any kind of capacity other than to say we want clarification and specific guidelines for how these types of events happen until we have a vaccine in place or until we've managed to stop, community spread. And so at this point, we're just looking for further guidance and clarification on that. And I think youth sports and amateur sports and professional sports is going to be handled entirely differently, all on its own. So,
right. All right.
I think we're just looking for smart. We're just including language that says we'd like smart, specific guidance on how we move forward.
Right.
So we're now at 3:43. I know Rosa has to leave soon to go to her other meeting. I wonder what other things we as this subcommittee need to do in the few minutes we have left until some of us have to go, and it might kind of be on a pause for now.
Molly, I think in terms of where we go from here and the recommendations we put forth for the report for Friday, what a bunch of the other subcommittees, what they're doing is they are, if there's any additional recommendations that need to be inserted in this final report or clarifications, requests for clarification, if I'm not sure if we've got a draft document together for this. Craig, do we have a draft document together?
No, there's no draft that's in place. It's all in terms of, just recommendations that have been forwarded, but we don't have a specific document for this subcommittee yet.
Okay, so what I would suggest is that the committee vote, unless you all feel there's a need for another meeting before Friday at noon. What I would suggest, and this is what some of the other subcommittees have done as well, is to give Molly the authority as the chair to work with staff informing the recommendations and clarifications that go to the governor in the final report. Mary Quinn, anything else?
No, I was going to say exactly that, and just say that the event alliance info that was forwarded can probably largely be used as the guiding document. You know, we'll just pull what we want from that document as it relates to Lexington. So for example, in my hotel subcommittee, they looked at the benchmarks that the American Hotel and Lodging Association had recommended, and they just agreed to adopt those at the local level. So again, we're not recreating a whole new batch of guidelines. We're just simply following, because a lot of the benefit of these national associations is they've done them in tandem with medical professionals. And so they've been vetted through that lens. And so we could just use the event alliance guidelines reopening as our starting point, and then add the Lexington specific, you know, clarification, request for more information to that. And Molly, I'd be happy to work on that with you if that's if that meets with acceptance from the rest of the group.
Yes.
And of course, we'll share, you know, we ultimately send to Quinn for inclusion in the master report. We'll share that with you all just as soon as it's done.
So do others feel okay with doing that?
Yeah.
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 Absolutely.
Okay. Ricky? Ricky, you're muted. Are you okay with that?
You lost her voice.
I keep forgetting about that. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And Councilmember Reynolds?
Yes.
So it looks like that sounds like it's an okay plan. Mary Quinn and I will work on having something to be able to give to Quinn by noon on Friday.
Great.
I have a question. So for the festivals and events and things that were to happen this summer or the fall, is there like a specific way that people should get information out about those festivals happening or not happening? Like if we've basically decided in this group that it will be really hard to have any festivals before there's a vaccine or widespread. So what is there like a way to get that information out to everyone? Maybe I don't know, going through Visit Lex along with the city, how we can make sure that people know what's happening or not happening.
Consistent messaging with the same referring to the same guidance and things like that. It seems like once that we would need to have the document to submit, pass it in front of the mayor, get clarification from the governor, and at that point we would be able to say how we arrived at that conclusion. I don't know, Mary Quinn?
I agree. And I also think we've got an opportunity again to talk with Monica Conrad, since our local Parks and Rec is so heavily involved with many of these community festivals and events. And so we can certainly engage her in that conversation on mass communication once we have some of these items clarified and can provide people with good info. So again, that's something we can certainly look to collaborate with her department on as well. Right, Quinn?
Yes.
I agree with that as well. I think Monica already has a list of resources that she uses to get the word out in the community through news outlets and the website and so on. We can use those same outlets for this purpose.
Great, that's really good.
Point, though, that communication, frankly, over communication. I was on a phone call yesterday with some of the folks in Frankfurt, and they said there's no such thing as redundancy right now. Just keep saying it over and over. So,
well, and I would imagine with some of the festivals too, not everybody would have access to a computer. So there'll need to be physical signs and information on bulletin boards and good, consistent messaging from everybody.
Rosa wants to say something. Oh, we can't hear you.
Yeah, Rose, I don't think we can hear you. She's not muted.
Yes.
I think she's saying she has to go, maybe.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. That's probably, yeah.
Thank you, Rosa, for being here.
Thank you,
So
Rosa.
much. We appreciate it.
Nice to meet you virtually. Okay. Well, okay, looks like Rosa did leave. Okay. Is there anything else that we need to figure out or talk about?
Actually, this brings me a certain level of relief in terms of thinking of not doing certain things like Jazz on the Lawn with 2,000 people is probably not going to happen regardless of how fast things slow down with the virus. But what we're, I guess, trying to do is like figure out how to repackage some of these things into smaller events, more of a bite size that we can stay within guidelines and demonstrate sort of the healthy way to proceed. Because my sense is that this is going to have long-lasting impact in terms of how people want to gather and how we conduct some of these big events. So, thank you.
I think it's that same old adage. There are other people facing similar, if different problems, and it's nice to have a group who understands the opportunities and the challenges of doing events or festivals or having a venue or a place where people like to come.
Yeah.
Especially as the weather is going to be warming up, there's going to be more, I think, hue and cry to come to these places.
And I think having consistent information at a high level in terms of these recommendations will take some pressure off of us from people who want things to happen regardless. Because I've already had that with a couple of board members with the lawn party who just are determined that we're going to do it. And it's just not going to happen the same way as before. So having that consistent message and a place to point people to is going to be helpful, just from a PR point of view.
Yeah. I think everyone is kind of grieving that things have changed, and the grief comes out in different ways. Sometimes some people take longer to get used to something new and different and just can't let go.
Yeah.
I think too, one of the things that I've heard over and over again from our restaurants and bars and hotels is there's a great responsibility to take care of our employees in all this. And so we certainly can't open back up with gusto and be exposing them to serious health risks. That's not a win for any of us either. And so it's just going to look like a very different 2020. And my hope is that, we will be well on the road to recovery next year. I mean, this year, but especially for our industry, I think we're going to be among the last to really fully recover. And so we have to do it in phases so that we can be smart and safe about it.
Yeah. Well, I certainly appreciate getting to see and get to know you all this way. Thanks to Craig and Quinn and Mary Quinn for their leadership and guidance. And I assume we will be in touch with when we submit the draft, we will share it with the members of the subcommittee.
Good.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll make sure that anything that's put together gets distributed to all of the members of the subcommittee as well.
And if anyone has any last minute things that they want to add, is it okay if they send those to you, Craig or Quinn?
Sure, that can come to me. That would be totally fine.
Okay, just in case there are things that we haven't thought, someone hasn't thought of, or for the people who weren't able to be on the call, that just is another option for communicating everything that we're thinking of.
Right.
All right. Well, I can't thank you all enough, and look forward to seeing you in person sometime, I hope soon.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much. We
Thanks so much, Molly.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Nice to meet you, Molly.
You too. Thank you.